SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to today's lecture. So, we will continue our discussion on some of the aspects of mineral economics which we started, and we have been discussing about some certain macroeconomic aspects under which we got ourselves introduced to the national mineral policy, which is a regulatory tool for the policy of sustainable exploitation of mineral resources in tandem with the national economic policy and the in linkage with other industrial activities and still mineral industry being given the status of a standalone industry. And we also had a brief look at one such thing, that is in an international perspective, that is the law of the sea for exploitation of the resources of the seabed, which by spirit belongs to the mankind, but generally the countries with which having coastline and are the ones which will be mostly be getting the benefit of the mineral resources of the seabed, although a very active exploitation of the mineral resources of the seabed is yet to start. So, we will just continue our discussion with a little bit of more on this law of the sea. Just to make you aware, India as a country had a very elaborate and ambitious plans of exploitation of resources of the seabed, concentrating mostly on the Central Indian Ocean basin, and its efforts for exploitation of exploration and exploitation of the mineral resources of the seabed goes back to the 70s in the last century, and by the time it was by 1980-81 or so, India already had identified delineated certain regions in the Central Indian Ocean basin for exploration and exploitation of the mineral resources, and mostly it was focused on the manganese nodules, which are, we all know, are very rich resources for not only just iron and manganese, but for nickel and cobalt. And so, under the aegis of this United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and which came to be effective since 1994 and has been signed. There are about 90 countries who have been signatory to such conventions, and there are still some of the issues which are not yet resolved, such as the benefit that is to be given to countries which are landlocked. So, keeping those issues aside, under this law of the sea, there is a statutory body which is this preparatory commission which was established. This preparatory commission was to oversee the applications of the countries which are essentially known as the pioneer investor. So, this concept of pioneer investor came into existence, and this preparatory commission is like an international regulatory body which was entrusted with the responsibility of granting license or permission for exploration and exploitation of different parts of the ocean floor, of the sea floor. So, by that time in the mid 80s, there were 4 countries including India, that is France, Japan and erstwhile USSR, who were identified as the prime investor, and India, and there were some clauses laid out that there will be minimum of 150,000 square kilometer area which is to be delineated by a pioneer investor, and an amount of the order of $1 million US to be paid as an initial fee to this preparatory commission for granting for the for obtaining the permission. And in India already identified in the Central Indian Ocean Basin 2 such areas, and the condition of this preparatory commission was that the pioneer investor would be allowed to do the exploration and exploitation in half of this area and relinquish the other half for future use by whatever way it could be decided. So, when it was selection of half of this area, so there was all initiatives taken to in dividing this part in the ocean in the Central Indian Ocean Basin into several blocks, and kind of preliminary estimation of reserves and all were made. And even by 1980, by 1981, even India started to dredge and recover the nodules from the seabed in the Central Indian Ocean Basin. And there were organizations, there was this like this Council of Scientific and Industrial Research were taking up active research on recovery of these metals from these manganese nodules by using various hydrometallurgical processes. At the same time, there were research laboratories were also assigned with development of the technology for seabed mining, and as of now it is still in the process, and there is still work going on. And sometimes it is being criticized also that since it is very high expensive affair to do the seabed mining and recovery of the resources of the seabed, still this it has been quite an welcome effort, and it has given provided a lot of boost, and we all look forward to exploitation of this especially the manganese nodules, and also in addition to that some of the sea floor hydrothermal systems where metal sulfide deposits also could be exploited in the near future. So, it is that is what is the Indian status. We have been identified as a pioneer investor and ready to exploit the seabed resources. So, with this little bit of idea on this statute or this regulatory body like international regulatory body like that is formulated as law of the sea, being agreed upon by the different all the countries of the world, but there is always political factors which are involved in it in proper implementation, and which we see, even though there are many of the things which are delineated, but still we have many such conflicts still as we come to know. We will have to see how these things are coming up for when the land based resources will get depleted, and how the seabed resources are coming to supplement or to augment the resources. So, with this we will move on to discuss one of the topics of interest in mineral economics, that is the metal price. We all know that these metals which are these ores which are produced in different in all the mineral producing countries, there some recovery processes are there as different hydro and pyrometallurgical processes. The metals are extracted and the metals are marketed in international market. There is a international hub like called the London Metal Exchange LME, where producers and consumers do bargain and come to mutually agreeable prices, and which are stated as the price of the particular metal that is traded in between different countries in import export and all. So, there are many factors on which these prices depend. If we look at them one by one, then it could possibly be the reserve, the total amount, the total metal that is available, the total mine life for how many years, and what is the total revenue that is expected from a particular mineral deposit. So, reserve and cutoff grade is one of the points which decides at what price the metal should be marketed. For example, in the olden days, in the earlier time when there was no much of technology for bulk mining that was developed, the cutoff grade of a metal like copper was, say, for example, 3%. At the time, the copper price definitely must have been higher, but as and when the bulk mining technology improved, and like most of the porphyry copper deposits were able to be mined, and the cutoff grade went down to as low as 0.2%, and the mining technology improved, and the cost of production of the ores in the mines also improved. So, with that, the price definitely started to fall, or that price varied. So, it is one of the important points. Sometimes the prices are also decided on the policy of giving protection to consumers. Like we can give an Indian example where the fertilizers are a price ceiling is fixed for, because most of these fertilizers are used in agriculture, and agriculture is promoted, and some amount of subsidization is done. So, the price could also vary on this issue. There are stocks, like sometimes some of the mineral producing country could use a policy of something called as a stockpiling. That means accumulation of the metals in huge amount. For example, at one point of time, United States not being a part of the International Tin Council accumulated a reserve of almost about of the tune of 2 years of world production of tin, and was actually controlling. So, it was not allowing the tin price to go up, and with the situation that it could release the tin to the market, and some such situations also take place, and then Indian salt production example also could be cited for that. A geological mode of occurrence is definitely one of the one of the reasons, but which is of non-political or non-economic issue. If the ore body, the rich part of the ore body is available in near surface and in favorable geological conditions in which the mineral could be mined at a low cost, and the cost of the metal also is likely to remain low. The inflation in input cost, that is the cost of mining, depends on inputs like the capital, labor, energy, and so on. As and when the capital cost increases, the cost for mining increases, and correspondingly the cost of the metal also goes up. The performance of the industry. So, like there are certain points of time in which there has been quite a bit of turbulence or the strikes in different industries, like the example of the Canadian zinc plant could be given, during which there is always an artificial, or there is some kind of perturbation to the situation, and it also affects the metal prices. These cartels and associations, one of the example is which we generally come to know in our day to day life is the OPEC, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, who actually regulate the price of oil, and also put a restriction on what should be the annual rate of production of crude, so that the price is maintained at a little higher level, so that the oil producing countries get the benefit of it. And the International Tin Council is one of the examples, and it definitely remains as a fact that it is, in spite of the presence of such kind of cartels, sometimes there are more imposing political geopolitical issues which sometimes override such kind of cartels and control the prices. There are sometimes a country can decide to fix a statutory price. For example, coal in India fixed by the government, it is regulated by the government for different purposes, and the price is not allowed to rise or fall from a certain value. Then the integrated price differential, sometimes there are prices of the same coal, but could be different for different grades, and also in case of mica. For example, the mica is a good example. Mica, the highest price will be for the very well formed mica books, and gradually the price fall with the quality, and sometimes with the impurity present, and since they can be used by different types of industries. And So, in this case, even sometimes even a particular mineral resource which has got two different types of occurrences, interdeposit variation also could be a factor in which the price could be different, but if it is being regulated by a single body, the price could also possibly be made up in that way. International price, that is a domestic producer and exporters, that is a controlling factor. The sales promotion, for example, government decides to production for the larger scale production of fertilizer which will be used by farmers for agriculture, and in that case also the price will be regulated, and the exchange rates, that is the inflation and all these issues come into consideration, where the value of, for example, you all know that the value of rupee keeps on fluctuating with respect to dollar, and that also will be will definitely have an impact on price of any commodity, including the mineral commodities. Just an example, so as one of the exercise that is taken up in mineral economics to study such kind of behavior over a considerable period of time, and the longer the period the better it is, and as we also discussed before that mineral economics it involves a quite rigorous extensive amount of research and analysis on the production, consumption and price data of the past, to understand the cycle, to understand the behavior or the way in which price varies. This is an example of a variation of a price of metal copper for a period from starting from 1989 to 2003, about 15 years time. We could see that this price never doesn't remain constant, it's as expected, and there are several periods in which the price is high and there are troughs and peaks, and so these provide ample scopes for econometric time analysis, time series analysis, and to establish the trend which we could, for example, we can see a trend of a decreasing trend from 1989 to 2003, and sometimes the forecast can only be done based on the number of years, past years of data that we have, and will have its uncertainty, but still many of the economic policies etc. are made on the basis of what is the forecast that is made by looking at the behavior that the price of the metal. And if we look at this diagram, which is which gives a period which is 1875 to 1995, almost around 120 years. Here also we could see that this there are peaks and troughs, which is very usual for the variation. So, people have proposed cyclicality, that means the variation of the metals prices obeys like kind of a cyclic behavior with rise and fall in the price, which is demarcated by this peak and trough, and it is also being correlated with the normal business cycle. So, business cycles always also go in the form like with peaks and troughs. So, the mineral prices also follows the similar kind of trend. So, the econometric time analysis tries to find out the trend and the seasonality. That means, in the previous diagram when we say, or for example, even if we in this kind of a diagram, if we take a smaller period from say 1895 to 1915, we will see several about at least 2 or 3, and within this 120 years time we could see a number of peaks and troughs. So, these represents the depending on the time span, we can put describe them as having some seasonality and can analyze that seasonality, and which will be useful for a prediction. And so, there is something like in context of price, there are also the terminologies which are used, which is called as the elasticity in the price. These elasticities could be because of demand or supply. So, as and when there is an increase in the demand of the particular metal, the price increases. When there is a fall in the demand, the price decreases, and also in the context of price, it also mineral price, also metal price also is said to be volatile. There is some kind of a the past memory is not kept, but it is more important to see the cyclicality and the elasticity in the metal prices. So from this we can possibly just look at that whenever there is a we are considering the macroeconomics of mineral resources, and in macroeconomy we generally have shocks. The shocks could be either could be a boom or a slump. So boom means positively that there is a very sudden hike in the price of a particular commodity, a particular metal, and that will make the producer have increased revenue, and there are slumps. So this slumps and boom, they have profound impact on the structure and welfare of the economies and societies concerned. We have several such examples in the past. During the Korean and Vietnam wars, there was a boom in the oil prices. The oil shock of the 1980s, and also the unpredictable prolonged depression in the mineral markets during the early 80s when the oil price collapsed in 1986. These are all examples of such kind of shocks. So the cycles and shocks in mineral revenues are moved through the economies of mineral exporting countries. So that is why there is always a need for an appropriate economic policy for exploitation of these mineral resources. So the mineral market characteristics and the economic policy. Booms or slumps produce variations in availability of resource rent. The market price is set by interaction of aggregate international supply and demand. No necessary connection between the costs of production of an individual mine or oil field and the market price obtainable for the product. Deposit cost competitiveness with other deposits, richness of the ore, accessibility, cost infrastructure, which we have discussed in brief. So there does not be any necessary connection between the cost of production of an individual mine or the ore field, which we just discussed, because there could be interdeposit variation of the cost of production of a particular ore, particular metal. The mineral policies are liable to wide fluctuations. Basic causes are well known. This is the part of the business cycle. Demand increases, mines approach full capacity, and any price boom will not be able to change the short term supply. For example, even when there is a particular mineral deposit whose exploitation starts with a particular growth plan, the rate of production in terms of the amount of metal per year, and even if there is a sudden rise in demand or a fall in demand, the supply cannot change immediately in response to such kind of fluctuations. So demand responsive to changes in incomes of the consumers, but in the short runs not responsive to price changes. Prices set in competitive markets without supply control arrangements, say example of copper, gold and aluminum market changes produce volatile prices. Prices set by producers, state control or collaboration, such as the cartels that we are talking about, iron, steel, diamond, oil and tin. Instability appears in volumes of sales. Both cases result in pronounced instability in revenue of producers. So these are the some of the situations which always have to be kept in mind while formulating the economic policy about the possible fluctuations of in the market, in the international scenario. So in the mineral revenue in context of economic policy, the magnitude of the rain from mineral resources cannot be predicted. It depends on so many parameters and varies with time. Government of any mineral producing country faces three-part problem: identify, maximize and retain mineral rent for domestic savings or consumption, managing economic activity over time in the face of risk and uncertainty, distribute mineral revenues across uses and over time. So these are the three important points which actually lie at the backbone of the economic growth from mineral resources, because it is no denying to the fact that there are economic benefits, and definitely mineral resources contribute to the economic growth of any mineral rich country. But the situation is that the mineral resources, when they are getting exploited, or any amount of revenue that is earned by the mineral resources, have to be very judiciously allocated, including for further exploration or allocation to some other form of wealth, which we will be discussing in the next point of discussion when we come to certain case studies. So, any government with mineral producing country has to keep these things very much in mind while formulating the economic policies. So, managing the economic activity over time in the face of risk and uncertainty, which we just discussed before. There are so many shocks that can happen in a mineral market. So, the governments in metal exporting countries seek to maximize windfall receipts from mineral exports and then confronting economic consequences of the reverse situations. For example, it is not that very difficult to understand that if a particular country is producing a mineral commodity or a metal which is on great demand in the international market, so it keeps on getting the benefit out of it in terms of, we say, what we call as windfall receipts. And then the reverse also can occur, but then the policy would be such that the economy has to be made sustainable by a proper policy which will take into consideration these situations. So, now let us look at one of the very interesting aspects of mineral economics when we talk of sustainability. Sustainability is a major concern to in the global context, and in case of mineral resources, we always ask the question to ourselves, how long our resources are going to last, and we all know that they are going to get exhausted at some point of time. So, before we go to the recycling of metals, whether it could be a mean of sustainability, this diagram would be interesting to look at. If we see the percentage of world mining, then we can see that almost all Europe, the United States of America, just other than the example of China, where the percentage of world mining is still have been increasing till 2009, most other developed part of the world, the mining activity has slowed down, or the percentage of world mining has almost from Europe starting from almost is greater than 60% to now coming to reaching to almost a value of 0. So, it does look like that these of course would have some different interpretations, in the sense that some of the countries which are already developed countries, they possibly have switched over from resource based economy to service based economy, and they are no longer dependent on their natural resources for the growth of their economy, whereas in the part of course India is not shown here, but in countries like developing world like India and China, we still depend on, our economy still depends on the mineral resources to contribute to our economic growth. And in cases of the developed countries, it is there is one concept that has come to as a intensity of use, where we see that the contribution coming from the mineral sector to the gross domestic product GDP is taking a reverse direction. That indicates that it has switched over from a resource based to a service based economy, but the question remains that after all, the per capita consumption of metals or the demand of metals or materials have never been on a decreasing or declining trend. So, let us look at one interesting thing, that whether we could have recycling of the metals, because with several centuries record of exploitation of metals and minerals, we have developed the industry, the different technology, developed different products, and have been using them for a good amount of time and have been discarding them in terms of scraps. And so, whether we could use those scraps and to make or to have metals recovered from these scraps and can supplement or can augment or to meet the increasing demand of metals or not. So, the scraps are essentially, we can think of in two different types. They are the new scrap and the old scrap. New scrap is not difficult to understand. Whenever there is any kind of fabrication that is taking place from metals, take any example like building a car or or making a nut or a bolt. So, there are metals which are coming out as waste, which can be called as new scrap. So, the availability of new scrap varies primarily with the overall level of metal consumption, which in turn more or less follows the business cycle. More is the consumption of metal, more will be the scrap that will be produced. There are two other factors which are also important: the changes in the allocation of metal amongst its end users, as some products generate more new scrap per ton of metal used than others. For example, it also depends on the technology of fabrication. And second is the change in technology that alter the amount of new scrap generated in the production of scientific metal using goods. This graph shows that copper is the metal which is the most contributing to the maximum percentage of the new scrap, and the bottom one is for lead, and this is zinc, and this is aluminum. So, the other type of scrap is the old scrap, that means that is recovered from all the metallic materials or the goods that are discarded, and this is the picture for the old scrap uses, where aluminum and zinc are the lowest, and we find that lead is higher because it is recovery from many of the metal materials containing lead. So, here this gives us an idea as to what is the possibility. The new scrap, the availability of secondary metals from new scrap will always have a limit in its supply of quantity, even if it is available or affordable at a price starting at 0. Even if the metal price goes up even up to P1 or even more than that, the quantity of the metals that will be available from the processing of the new scrap will be limited. And so, here we see that the availability of secondary metals from new scrap varies with metal consumption, that in turn varies with overall business cycle. So, two other factors are changes in the allocation of its end use and the change in technology, which we just discussed. And the picture with the old scrap is a little different, because old scrap are difficult to obtain, and they also to recover the metal. So, it will always depend on what is the price, the maximum price that could be affordable, and we see that the quantity of the metal which will be made available as from the old scrap will always have an increasing trend and can be substantial. Its quantity can go to very high values, and with the increase in the metal price. So, this is the basic difference between the old scrap and the new scrap, and the future is that the primary versus secondary producers technology in reducing cost of primary production as well as making primary production more friendly. So, the question remains that whether the mineral resources, whether we will be increasingly depending on scraps or these secondary production from old or the new scraps to meet the demand of our metal or not. Many of the schools of thought believe that actually the resources, the way we fear that the resources are getting depleted or exhausted, it may not be that very true, and maybe that the recycling will have very negligible or not so significant effect on the sustainability. But the others, but looking at such kind of picture, it looks that the recycling is going to be one of the major sources for the sustainable exploitation of the metal resources of the world. So, that is all about this some of the macroeconomic aspects. So, thank you. We will continue our discussion in the next class.